Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SoFi Weekly. SoFi under $7. Shorts continue to hold up a 17+% short interest.
Good.
Who's
Good.
buying?
Yeah, I didn't buy this week. I like what I got. I bought last week, and probably that's my last SoFi purchase. If we get into like the fives or the fours, I'll probably buy more there. But I'll probably wait until then.
Tevis?
Yeah, I bought this week. I bought on Tuesday and I bought again today. And I'll probably buy next week too. With some of these accounts that I don't do a lot of moves in, when the cost basis falls under a certain level, it just makes sense for me to buy. Some accounts have better cost basis than others. Depending on what the stock price is, I might buy in one versus the other.
Did you buy?
No, I've not bought SoFi in a little bit. I've been sort of buying Robinhood, Shift4. I've been accumulating other names.
I bought over the last 2 weeks a decent amount of PayPal.
So I don't use Zelle at all. It's a peer-to-peer transaction thing.
I freaking hate Zelle, and it's a terrible piece of garbage that no one should ever have to use. But some people insist on using it. I think it's because they don't have to sign up for anything extra. I think it's as simple as that. It is the worst.
SoFi has to create the UI to connect Zelle to the rest of the network. Have you guys seen the UI that SoFi created?
I have not.
Dude, I have a screenshot. Someone sent me a screenshot. This looks like utter dog shit. I'm sorry. I don't understand how this has been worked on for so long. What is that, dude?
And you know how this works? It's very clunky when you actually use it. People insist on using Zelle. They don't like using Venmo. They don't like using Cash App. They don't like using PayPal. And it's clunky and it's slow and it has issues, problems every freaking time. He had to go into a physical Wells Fargo branch. 6 hours later, still unresolved. And any person that is saying that Zelle is a competitor for Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, I don't know what's wrong with them. Like, they need to be checked out. They need drugs.
I think that you've had some very unique bad experiences because there's no way that everyone is having those experiences.
I talked to so many people and they're like, it's a freaking pile of junk. It's a terrible UI and it's a terrible experience. And that's when it works. And it doesn't always work.
In Canada, there's one fintech company that's trying to create their version of that here, which is Wealthsimple. And no one here uses.
We already have a solution here.
Every single financial institution uses Interact.
You can't have the network benefits without having that size unless you have perfect interoperability with all the systems. And it just doesn't work like that.
One thing that's pretty interesting is Cash App has benefited from, you can send someone money without them needing an account. They can accept money to an email address. So as long as you sign up for Cash App with that same email address, there'll be money waiting for you. They have benefited so much from people sending cash to people that don't have accounts. If you have even $10 waiting for you at this app, you're going to download that so then you can unlock the money. So you guys aren't annoyed you need to share information with strangers? I don't know what Zelle asks of you. I assume that it can work with a mobile number or email address, something like that.
There's two things you can do. The one that I've used is a QR code. You can do that, or there's like this ID thing that you can put in. I don't think it's an email address. I don't remember what it is. I try to steer clear of Zelle whenever I can. I know there's some fans of Zelle in the chat.
I didn't know this. Did you guys know this? They're owned by the biggest banks.
It's a conglomeration of all of them. It's not actually a private company.
Hearing the experiences being overwhelmingly negative from users, why is everybody on Zelle if everybody hates being on Zelle? It's interesting that they're a conglomerate of all the biggest banks out there.
So many customers were realizing that peer-to-peer networks was the next big thing. And then so all the big banks are like, okay, we're going to lose if we don't have a solution. So we're already part of this big lobbying solution. So why don't we just come together and make sure that we don't fall out of place? And that's why you see them in the transactions being by far the highest players, is because they already have all of the customers. That's why Zelle is very exciting. But dude, you can't think that a network that is by far the largest. I think they have like 100 and something million users, and like well into the 100 millions, hated by everyone. If the average person had that issue of taking away a half day, Zelle would never be used.
I think it's like an adoption thing as well. Like, what is the competitive advantage that Zelle offers that these other providers can't offer? Why is Zelle so dominant? Or like, why aren't they bleeding market share? Obviously, you can have a massive experience that everybody hates, but people still have to use because there's no alternative. Like, I just finished paying off my taxes. And if you go on the Government of Canada's website, you just want to tear your eyes out. but you still have to use it because you can't really do anything else. But for Zelle, there are alternatives. Then it becomes a level playing field. And you would imagine that they're just losing market share to Venmo, Cash App, or whatever else from a feature set perspective.
I think the real competitor is the people that are still not using peer-to-peer networks.
He says Zelle is native to the banking app you're using. Cash App and Venmo are not. Many people like myself don't necessarily want their money stored on several different platforms. So it does come back to that fact that it is a conglomerate between the biggest banks out there.
Absolutely, that's the answer of why they're so big. But over time, will Zelle eventually lose? It's not going to happen for a very long time because there's still such a large percentage of the population that even needs to get to Zelle in the first place.
Did you guys see that they changed the referral bonus on SoFi?
It was $75, then went to $100, and then went to $50.
For an investment standpoint, I think it's a good thing. And I think the signals they're getting a lot of new users just because of their marketing. Like their marketing is one of those things that has gone really, really right. Their user growth has been very, very good. And I think maybe that they're realizing like, hey, we have fantastic numbers. We don't need to have really high acquisition costs, like still a little bit of something out there in order to actually make this work. And I think what would confirm that is if that direct deposit bonus is actually reduced.
I don't think it matters that much, honestly. Like it's just a lever that they pull. They have a certain margin. If they want to allocate more spend, then they pull it one direction. If they want to allocate less spend, they pull it another direction. It has an implication on potentially how many users they can acquire on any given quarter, but it changes so frequently that I don't think it is significant because it's not a static thing. It's 50 today, it's going to be 25 tomorrow, it might be 100 a month from now, just because they want to have a push for members.
I mean, I've been with Wells Fargo for 10 years and I can never say that they've been a joy. Like SoFi, it's awesome. I'm enjoying the app. I'm enjoying how well integrated things are happening, the actual notifications. I know that there's room for improvement on the app compared to Wells Fargo, man. It's amazing. If people have a core banking relationship with people that they trust, they handle tech well, and they're able to integrate and use that flywheel effect across all products, which they're doing, that's the dream. I'm very bullish on SoFi.
Yeah, but like, look, on the other hand as well, it's been a year since SoFi publicly dropped that level 1 options is coming. And they're basically critiquing the fact that how come it's taking so incredibly long for these rollouts. If the screenshot or the mock-up that Tannor showed us is accurate and the finished product looks like that, I have some serious concerns about their ability to ship product. And this is coming from somebody with a strong product background. You can challenge the timelines all you want because you don't necessarily know the back-end implications or the effort required or the tech debt that you have to solve. But fuck, man, it's a UI. Like you can at least get that right, especially when you have a year or 2 years grace period to roll something out. Why are you announcing these things so far away from the actual rollout?
They said the 2024 to 2025 time is a potential complete technological change that could potentially postpone a lot of what they're working on because it could essentially mean they're working on something that's about to change completely.
Yeah, like if you're going to restructure your back end, you're not going to roll out changes because it's going to be throwaway work. You don't want to spend, even if it is something as small as a month, working on something if you're going to have to change it again a year later. In a company as big as SoFi and as organized as SoFi, they have a roadmap spanning 3, 5, maybe even more years out from a technology perspective, and their architecture plays a part in that.
What we're seeing with that Zelle thing literally looks like there was no any designer or anything on that. They probably have the brand colors for Zelle there because that is probably by requirement, and then they had literally the functionality buttons, the setting, send, save, split, and then check your activity. It just seems like, okay, get this on because this is a big concern for a lot of people coming over. You have the functionality. We're going to brighten it up here soon.
I think that's the most optimistic viewpoint out there. Like if you plot all the viewpoints on a scale, yours is like super on one side of it. It could absolutely be the case, but then if so, then it's a serious gap in their product marketing strategy. Do you have a communications plan with your client base? Like you're a public company, right? You should have this stuff figured out. Don't promise Zelle and have people anticipating it for a year or 2 years, or I think it was 3 years plus that people have been waiting for Zelle, and then roll out some lackluster thing. Like if you've already been having them wait 3 years, then 6 months more isn't the end of the world, but you actually make a good first impression on something and not something sloppy. So Zelle is one, level 1 options is another. I remember back in, I think, January of like last year, they had a reskin or a refresh of their app, and it took them all the way until something like April, May of last year to roll that out. Okay, guys, 4 or 5 months for a refresh. Like their front end changes, and the dark mode was the other one, and it rolled out and it was like in beta where it didn't work on some screens. I'm trying to figure out here.
During the time of like COVID, the reason what made me like SoFi so much is that they ship product like crazy. They brought in the money account, the invest account, the credit card. They were just partnering and launching at crazy speeds.
This was back in 2019, I think, when they launched the entire like invest platform as we know it, essentially. What happened after that time was two main people left their tech division, and they were essentially key members, if not co-founders of public.com, which is like a beautiful experience, at least from a user experience perspective. It could have absolutely been the case where they lost a lot of key tech talent that was instrumental in building out their first iteration, and maybe a lot of their product culture and their whole, shipping culture. They're just struggling. And it's fine normally, but it comes to light and it just makes them look bad in these circumstances where now somebody on X just brings up the fact that it's been a year since level 1 options and it was multi-year since Zelle. If it's going to be a perfect experience that's going to blow all competitors out of the water, like you have the benefit of being second in the market because you see the solution that you see the pitfalls of everybody else, and you can just roll something out that's better and more seamless. But don't take twice the amount of time and make it shittier than everything else out there.
Which I do worry about for things like level 1 options and stuff. It's like, okay, does this delay mean that we're going to come out with a product that is so good that everyone goes, oh my God? Or is it just going to be a bare bones experience where at least we have it?
They had to become profitable. That was key for them, B-Dub says. I get that. You can't really hire new people and invest in R&D and double down when you are focusing on profitability. But at the end of the day, you have like thousands of existing employees. It's an engineering and product leadership problem. It's a technical leadership problem. They don't have good, or at least it seems like when you compare the 2019 period to the 2024 period, there's a severe disconnect in terms of the actual processes internally that lead to that fast shipping culture.
I don't have insider knowledge as far as who is to blame, but there is a failure of execution, absolutely, with the tech side of it for SoFi. Not for Technisys, not for Galileo. They're perfectly fine. Phenomenal leadership there. I won't, point fingers. That's for Noto and Co. to figure out and resolve, and maybe they're doing that through the Uber guy.
Why not point fingers though, Roy? You have these executives that are paid millions of dollars to bring results, and everything is going well in terms of the user acquisition side, in terms of the benefits, in terms of the pure banking side, which makes the laggard sides of the business even more, sticking out. I think we should have a discussion around who is to blame and what is the core reason of that. I think that's the whole point of this podcast. It baffles me how they can't execute. And even if they can't execute, they can't go one layer further to that to explain the rationale as to why.
I actually blame Anthony Noto here. If something goes on for a little while, it could just be there's some missing pieces, not the right personnel, something needs to be adjusted. But ultimately, as a CEO, the buck stops with you. These have been ongoing problems for SoFi. They've underperformed as far as execution. I think Anthony Noto is a very, very good CEO. There's probably a couple of things. First is it may have taken them a little bit longer than they should have had to figure out that they did not have the right people in charge of that. I think Anthony Noto is capable of decisive action, but if somebody is doing a poor job, but it's somebody that you very much care for, I've been in that position before where I care about somebody, they're doing an absolute terrible job. You do everything you can to try to help that person and they just don't want to be helped. You have to be decisive at that point and make changes. And I won't name names on that end, but ultimately the buck stops with you when you're the person that's in authority.
Tevis, you've applied to be the head of product development at SoFi or something along those lines. You just got the job. Congratulations. What happens day one? What's got to change? What the heck is wrong?
So first of all, it's not the head. It's like one of their many directors. Like all of their subdivisions have their own individual leadership.
You are Jeremy Rishel.
Oh gosh, I am Jeremy Rishel.
You're overseeing the overseers.
So number one, first and foremost, you got to start top down in terms of the strategic landscape all the way down to the tactical stuff from a process perspective. I think First and foremost, you have to align on what the business direction is over the next 3 to 5 years, and then translate that to what needs to happen on the technical side of the business for them to execute on that. If they're going for business accounts, what can we do and how is our tech architecture set up in such a way that can support that over the long term so that we can actually start to move some of those big pieces around. That's one thing on the execution side of things. The other is I would look at the internal processes all the way down to the rituals. Like what is the frequency that we ship? How are we measuring velocity? How are we measuring efficiencies internally in the company? How do we report? How do we prioritize? How do we validate new functionality? How do we gather feedback? How do we QA and test? There's a lot of stuff. And then you go into the tooling. Specifically, you talk about what tooling are we using? How can we optimize the tooling? How can we optimize deployments? How can we look at what are we doing from an architecture perspective all the way through the stack? So you can see, okay, where are the hurdles? Where are we getting held up in terms of our deployment time? How can we reduce deployment time from hours to minutes and then go from there? And then you tackle the product side, the product communication side, the internal operations side. So on product comms, you say, okay, what are we communicating? When are we communicating it? How are we communicating it? And to whom? Go through that. What part of our roadmap are we communicating? How are we gathering feedback? Do we have some type of advisory board that we're tackling? How are we tapping into those people? How are we making sure that we're validating what we're launching? How are we gathering feedback on what we're launching? And what are the KPIs that drive into that?
I would assume that literally all of this is put into place at SoFi.
Dude, I would be shocked if most of this was not already put into place at SoFi because it's a public company. But somewhere in this whole blurb that I spat out is the secret of why they're lagging behind. It's a lack of process or a lack of tooling or a lack of headcount, resourcing, whatever it may be, or frankly, a lack of leadership in terms of implementing those things or at least identifying those things. You're only as strong as that weakest link in that development chain of events. You can actually see some real results. I suspect it's going to be tech debt related, that there's some, legacy infrastructure that they have to get across. But at the end of the day, I think that a lot of that stuff falls on the shoulders of Jeremy Rischel. If we can't get immediate execution, then we at least should get some transparency. They have all of the resources to be able to fix this problem, which makes it so frustrating that it's not fixed because they have no excuses to not fix it.
I don't think that revenue or profit should be the only priority. It's going to lead to a problem with user satisfaction, with stickiness of clients, which are more measured by LTV or lifetime value rather than just what the boost is right now. And which honestly, they are really focused on credit and their underwriting and making sure that lending is bringing in the big bucks. But in the same length, like you're losing users on SoFi Invest. Like you're seeing some levels of churn or people saying, hey, I love SoFi. My entire portfolio is with SoFi, but I'm investing in it via Robinhood.
I personally know people that left SoFi Invest for Robinhood because they didn't have level 1 options. And the other thing too is it fuels that narrative that SoFi doesn't know how to execute and ship products. I think they do. I think that they're capable of it. The reason why is we see what they're doing with the Galileo platform, and Technisys is a little bit more of a black box, but we see it there too. They're capable, but maybe you can't really compare them to like Robinhood, who's in a class of their own. But to the other fintechs, is like, sure, you should be able to compete and do things right along with that. And it should not take an announcement and then 10 years later, like, hey, guess what? Level 1 options. We got it, guys.
You just said it yourself. You can't compare them to Robinhood. And here I am saying, why shouldn't we aspire for that? They're a product-driven company. And so why can't SoFi be that? They have the resources to do it. So there's nothing really stopping them. They can absolutely do it. The reason we're talking about this stuff is because the revenue and the profitability, those are all like lagging indicators. They're after the fact. The reason we look at member acquisition is because that's what's going to forecast what that revenue is in the future. The reason we look at product improvements, feature enhancements, new product lines is because that's what's a leading indicator for the financial metrics that are coming down the line. At the end of the day, like the critique that SoFi is getting from a pure product perspective is that, oh, well, they're not Robinhood and they can never aspire to be Robinhood. And if I were to put them on a scale, and I would have legacy financial institutions on one hand, and I would have the Cash Apps and the Robinhood on the other hand, SoFi would be closer towards the legacy financial institutions from just a user experience perspective. If they are going to be positioning themselves as a hybrid company, tech company, whatever you want to call it, fintech, they need to have the tech portion at least somewhat figured out. They can't have a snail's pace that is comparable to, a Bank of America and then come out here touting that, oh, look at all of our product offerings. Like, it just doesn't make sense, because you do have pure tech plays in the market like Robinhood, who's coming out with 24-hour trading, and who's coming out with all of these new enhancements, even all the way down to the user experience on their app just gets refreshed over and over again. And it seems like SoFi, from an app perspective, from a user experience perspective, is just trying to catch up to what Robinhood was like 3 years ago.
I do agree that SoFi does not need to go after that to have the best invest platform, especially whenever it comes to like research tools and stuff. The problem is level 1 options are not an add-on. It's a necessity or a complete strategy for a lot of people's portfolios. It's not a nice to have. It's a, if it doesn't have, I'm not using it. Their time to ship has slowed down since their peak in COVID time, stuff like this, or ever since they've gotten the bank license, or especially Technisys. I don't know. I think that it's worth addressing. I think that management needs to know that that is something that the investor or user wants to see. If that isn't their priority, well, what is the priority? Because before you said that that was the big part of your thing, right? Fast selection, content, convenience. That was your whole thing. That's how we differentiate ourselves. Well, where the hell's the fast if you guys don't ship anymore? But people do agree. I mean, there's certain comments like this that have been floating around, and it has to do with some of the products that have released lately. I think level 1 options are honestly 2025. The same person that I heard the rumors from about crypto getting taken off the platform ended up being true, that it was going to go to blockchain.com, that said that they were going to focus on automated investing, which all those other things have all been true. Maybe the 2025 prediction is also going to be the case.
If I ask you guys, and I mean, we've been covering this company week in and week out, what has SoFi launched first 6 months of this year? What have they launched from a product perspective?
They did something with car loans that was a little bit different, not just a partnership.
No, I don't mean like offerings.
Oh.
I mean like in terms of their user experience, how has their app changed? Is there any new
Zelle.
feature? I guess Zelle in dark mode?
Dark mode. There was a big point where they went from 7-day funding on their personal loans to same-day funding. There was multiple days, like they went from 7 to 5 to 2 to 1 to same day. There's no press releases during that time. That's a massive difference. And they've actually said that they've closed out on a lot of emergency loans because people needed that money right now. So I think that it's hard to say. SMB funding, I mean, that's a marketplace product.
I mean, they could be working on a lot of things in the background. And again, that's the very optimistic view, that they have this massive R&D team going in the background, working night and day, and they're going to completely revamp the entire experience when we wake up on Monday. That's a very, optimistic view, but I just see it as like, okay, well, they rolled out Zelle, they rolled out dark mode. That's 2 things that they've been working on for multiple years. What can we expect for the second half of the year from a product perspective?
Robinhood, we all know Robinhood has shipped out a lot more, and they're in the process of shipping out a lot more. PayPal, absolutely as well. Block seems like it has. Shift4 has. Nubank has by leaps and bounds.
No one ships like Nubank, but you're right. Like what is Cash App launching during this time?
You have to be shipping products all the time, innovating and staying at least current with people. Not everything needs to be excellent, but there needs to be a lot of excellence. And SoFi has done a lot of things well, a lot of things. They will absolutely be thriving as a company, and I have no doubts in the future. But where they have lagged behind is the product side, specifically for SoFi users.
There's 2 things I'll say, right? Number 1 is the fact that we're holding them to a higher bar. It might sound like I'm coming off pretty harsh, but that's only because SoFi is seen as a disruptor to this legacy space. They can't do that if they're shipping at the same rate as the legacy financial institutions.
Good point.
The second thing I'll say, a lot of people might point to things that SoFi has done over the past year, but when you actually put them into the right buckets, you'll realize that SoFi's other business segments really mask the fact that they have had no real product releases. Oh, they had an MBA partnership. Oh, look what they're doing with TGL. It's like, yeah, those are not product initiatives. Those are marketing initiatives. Look what they're doing on the banking side. Look at their referrals. Look at the bonuses. It's like, well, those are not pure product initiatives. They're using the cash that they have. They're using the sales and marketing spend that they have to get better promotional offers for you. When you strip out everything that they've done as a business altogether and you bucket it in terms of what vertical that belongs to, you'll realize that they've done a lot, but not a lot on the product side. And it doesn't seem like that to people looking at it from a surface level because you get press release after press release every single week, but there's really nothing in this particular category that we're talking about.
It doesn't take much for SoFi to execute, and they have a history of executing well. This is just one of those areas where they're not doing particularly well. We're trying to talk about why. There's talk on X, and there's a couple of mentions of that between Chris Hagar and Tim Sweeney about credit cards. Credit cards is one of those. It's a big loss right now. They featured it in this earnings, and if they're able to flip that switch, and I think that they are, they can turn that into a profit engine that is going to dramatically help the business. The lending segment, they've been deliberately cautious. I will say, Noto has this vision that it's like, if they're a little slower this year, that's fine. They can flip the switch with lending. They have plenty of room to do that and absolutely excel in that business too. Then there's a tech platform stuff that's coming as well. That the large, it's going to take a bit. It's not going to be overnight. There's a lot of good stuff. And the marketing side, we mentioned that already. I still think in the next 2 quarters, there's going to be a quarter where they have 1 million user growth. They're absolutely killing it on these standpoints. There's some things they're not doing well. And so just us saying, hey, there's some concerns here doesn't mean like we're all bearish and it's going to stay at 7 or go down to 3 or whatever forever.
That execution risk, we discount that because we're saying, okay, Noto has a vision. We trust in Noto's vision, and that's all well and good. And the analysts say, well, past results are not indicative of future ones. I think that is going to be wearing a little thin, and it is starting to wear thin because I'm just seeing the business firing on all other cylinders, number one. And number two, it's because they are not in a vacuum. Competitors are running, competitors are moving faster. And so when you look at a one-to-one offering, it's not the same as it was 12 months ago or 24 months ago. So if I would have had a better chance, at least on the credit card side, at least on the invest side, as they do today, Robinhood released a new credit card. They have these new benefits. 12 months ago, SoFi, let's say if there was 100 people, SoFi might have won 10 and Robinhood might have won 10. The rest of the market gets the 80. Today, maybe SoFi wins 5 and Robinhood gets 15 or whatever it may be. The point is, if competitors are moving faster than you, it's only a matter of time until you're irrelevant in the market. At the end of the day, it is Anthony Noto's thing. Like, he can have a vision and it could be the most beautiful vision in the world. But if you are not scrutinous on your team to get you there and you get there 5 years late, well, all of a sudden the landscape has changed and it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be.
It's the PayPal problem, right? Is you were sprinting, you got confident, and then you got passed. Thank you all so much for watching. Really do appreciate your time, but bye for now.